Babawale Obayanju, and he is of the Environmental Rights Action, and he's also one of the anchors of Tell That Story. You may have seen Tell That Story on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can also look for their website. It's Tell That Story. You see how photographers used to tell stories about the environment, about what's going around us. Wale, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'll be speaking on protecting the protectors. So let me quickly share my screen. So I'm just going to go in a proper democratic setting. Political freedom is a necessity, not a thing for the rich and the powerful. I'll say that again. In a proper democratic setting, political freedom is a need and not a want. It's a necessity and not a thing for the rich and the powerful. A democratic society cannot be built or strengthened or preserved if the freedom of assembly and association is not guaranteed, encouraged, or supported. Civil society groups, they are the watchdog and they are heterogeneous entities. They include non-governmental organizations, faith-based organizations, community associations, foundations, cooperatives, labor unions, indigenous community groups, social movements, informal collective, grassroots, community-based groups. And the fishermen, they fall into the community association, indigenous community groups. And many times when the discourse of CSOs are brought on the table, many of these indigenous are not regarded as civil society organizations. And this is an anomaly, and I think it's part of what we are looking at today, how we can correct it and protect those groups in the community. So like Roderick emphasized this morning, CSOs need to do more community groundwork to ensure that the citizens' voices are heard where they should be heard. And Ken also talked about this, how there's need for educated activists like we have at School of Ecology to do more by informing themselves, getting abreast with the processes in the community and getting abreast with the science and the technology and all the information they need to be powerful people to do the work that they should be doing. CSOs also monitor government, policymakers' activities, holding them accountable for their actions when needs be if they infringe on the rights of people. They support and protect, promote, and fulfill human rights within the various political spaces. So what are the rising concerns we have today with respect to these watchdogs who ensure that the people's rights is upheld and citizens' rights are not infringed upon? These days, CSOs are finding it very hard to support the protection, promotion, and fulfillment of human rights within various political sectors due to legal and practical restrictions. Yeah, another thing is we have seen several cases. Why is my network breaking? We've seen several cases of human rights defenders being killed across the globe while trying to fight for the rights of the people. I've also seen government trying to suppress movement and criminalize boycotts and protests, and people who are protesting, and they decide to label these guys either as terrorists, eco-terrorists, or what have you. So these are some rising concerns that require us to look at how best to protect these watchdogs. Another one, actually, I'm going to give you a case study of 3 people who have been killed from 2005 to 2016, and one who escaped being sentenced to life imprisonment. One of them is Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni 9, who were killed by hanging for defending the Ogoni people and fighting for climate and environmental justice for the Niger Delta. Betta Caceres was also murdered in 2016 for fighting for the people of a community that a dam should not be sited in that community. And recently we had a journalist who was arrested for doing his job as a watchdog to ensure that money goes to where it should go to. and he was charged for treason, terrorism, and an attack to overthrow the state government. It took the likes of Ken Henshaw and some others in the NGO space and activist space to stand up and fight for this guy's right. He was arrested in August, and by February, he was released because activists came together, concerned people came together, and fought together to ensure that this man is protected. So this is part of what we should be doing as activists, civil society group members in the society. Like Ken said earlier, we cannot run solo. We need to run together because running solo provides room for easy attacks. It makes us easy to become praise to those who don't want CSOs to do their work. So this has led to the concept called shrinking spaces. So I want to talk about, because it's become a big issue among the civil society groups across the world. And what this is simply talking about is the repressive, securitized, politicized, militarized environment that civil society activists, protectors of the ecosystem have had to go through in recent time in doing a bid to do their bid as an activist or civil society actors in the society. We've had represented attacks on human rights defenders who have been, some have been killed, many have been jailed, many have been labeled names that they shouldn't be labeled. Shrinking Spaces also talks about the depolitization of contestation. Civil society groups have always sought for space on decision-making tables to be able to influence policies. Shrinking Spaces also talks about how we are losing our spaces to affect or render suggestions that would influence policies that would protect society actors in our society. Shrinking Spaces also talks about how we are losing our spaces to strategize, to organize, to protest, or to do peaceful actions in the guise to raise legitimate voices of the community people, to request for rights that have been infringed upon to be freed, that the people should be able to have their rights to their lands, to their farms, to their waters, to things that require that the community people require to have a peaceful and healthy life. So Shrinking Spaces also discusses this kind of ideologies. So also we're going to look at, just stop a bit, sorry. So now, why are these, or how is the government doing this to impact on the people? How are they doing this to make protectors not be protected? One way the government has succeeded, and the big corporations of the world have succeeded to do this, is by imposing constraint on the ability of CSO to receive international funding. They are creating it might not have been effective now in Nigeria, but in many parts of the world where civil society groups are functioning from, because the government, no, like somebody said yesterday, I think it was Professor Umar or Aku, talking about how funding is on the shrinking part because government are not funding researchers or are not funding civil society actors who are supposed to be the watchdog, ensuring that there's a balance in society. And now they are also imposing constraints on the ability of CSOs to receive international funding. That is one way they are ensuring that protectors are not being able to do their work effectively. Another way is by creating laws which regulates the activities of non-profit organizations, like giving very difficult registration processes to require to make your organization a formal one in a society where you operate. All of this is important for us to understand because for you to fight a cause, you need to understand the roots or the problems associated with that cause. We're talking about protecting the protectors. If you do not understand how these protectors are being endangered, we will not be able to provide proper solutions to the kind of protection that we should be offering to the protectors. The other thing is the government and the big organizations, they try to impose policies and practices that restrict our right to assembly, association, making protests and action illegitimate, as we have seen in various political spaces across the world. And the other one they do is by criminalizing stigmatizing and big English, delegitimization of human rights defenders. Pardon my big English. So these are some of the things that they do. They criminalize human rights defenders, they stigmatize them, and they make them illegitimate. In 2018 alone, Global Witness reported that an average of 3 defenders of territories were killed every week. Not every month, not every year, every week, while they were defending their homes, forests, rivers from encroachment by mining, logging, and agribusinesses. They documented about 164 killings globally, with mining being the worst sector where they attacked the CSO operatives in that sector. State security of officials or forces were the ones used from this report to ensure that 40 killings happen, and some other private actors suspected by civil society investigation to have killed the rest. So things like this have been going on and on around the globe, and there is need for us to begin to think about how best to tackle these issues as they come, that we might be able to do our work as civil society group actively in our society. Another way they have done this is by restricting the freedom of expression in general and as well as online, because online is becoming a big space for us to express our dissent, to express our concerns, and to express any infringement on human rights. There have been several attempts by government and big corporations to make sure that we have restriction on how we express these things in the public. In Nigeria, for example, recently we've had this issue of the checks on what kind of information goes online, even to the extent of bringing up stuff like what they call that thing now. You are for the presidency. Like if you say anything online, it could be taken as if you are trying to either overturn the government or trying to usurp what they are doing. So things like this are ways that the government and the people who have the big money are trying to infringe on the rights of protectors. Another way they have done this is by capturing spaces traditionally inhabited by CSOs, by raising up what they now call government-oriented NGOs and the likes, and lobbies funded by them who go and counter whatever policies these CSOs are trying to influence. So these are some of the ways that they do this. So I'm going to give some examples. It's unfortunate I can't share my screen to show you my presentation, but I'll give an example of the Conference of Parties for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC COP. In COP21, for example, that held in France, we had about at least 24 activists who were placed under house arrest using emergency counter-terrorism measures enacted by the deadly Paris attack that month. Why they did this was to ensure that these guys do not find their way to the COP. Because if these guys got to the COP, they are going to be their brains, their minds that would help galvanize people to take the right actions. So the government and the authorities at that time found a way to ensure that these 24 activists did not find their way to the COP. But with or without them, thank God they have people whom they've groomed, they have movement which they belong to. They were not solo people. They were not just individuals walking. They walked in movement. Things still happen, and actions that needed to take place took place, but there were restrictions. Another one was in Poland in COP24 in 2018, where there was issued again terrorist alerts, and many comrades were denied entry into Poland. Some at the point of entry in Poland, their passports were seized and they were labeled terrorists, and many others like that. These are some of the actions that government have taken to restrict protectors from doing their legitimate work as civil society protector or watchdogs at different spaces. In COP25 in 2009, we also had very strict laws that constrained people to what I would call the outer court. They created a space where you have to take permission. For you to do peaceful actions, you must take permission, and if you are not granted, you cannot do your actions. But the civil society groups that were present mobilized themselves together and decided to go to the inner courts to demand that big polluters be kicked out of the COP. And what did they get in return? The police physically debarred many of the comrades who were in the front line demanding for justice. And they packed those who they could pack and moved them out into the cold for hours. Rather than the big polluters to be kicked out of the COP, activists, protectors were kicked out of the COP. So we need to begin to think about how best we can protect these protectors who fight for the rights of the people. So now the other thing is, why is this important that we do this? The government have cited some reasons why they are doing this action. And to me, these are not legitimate. They're not legitimate. They don't hold water for me. One of the reasons they have cited, or some of the reasons they have cited, is that they have concerns about maintaining public order. They have concerns about terrorism and money laundering. But the question before us is this: are these CSOs money launderers? Are they not just people who use their pen, who use their minds, and who use their tongues to stand up for the rights of their people? They don't have big guns. They don't have big money bags like the big corporation. They are just common humans who stand together in unity to demand justice for their people. So why should they be criminalized for such actions of peace? So we need to start thinking about what we can do as CSOs, make sure this does not continue. Earlier today, some people are like, from yesterday and today, we've seen how some of the tactics of these people have been put to effect. Yesterday, we heard about how researches are being funded just for journals, but not to meet reality, physical needs present in the community. This also applies to CSO groups who gets funding from the international space, from international donors. We have seen cases where the international donor, they define for the CSOs what kind of activities they should be doing. And this also creates a problem for the protectors, because if you're not funded to do the right activities that will help the people, it will also result in a problem for the protectors and for the society. So we need to begin to think about how do we get out of this. So I'm going to tell us some of the ways that I think we can, but it's not exhaustive. We have to sit down, put on our thinking caps, and think of the best way to ensure that we protect our protectors. So one way we have to do this is to resist every form of criminalization and demonization of causes that would address the very heart of the established power and many other perfectly legitimate forms of political activity. Simply put, we need to stand together. We need to resist every form of criminalization and demonization of our causes that would defend the people. It could either be through your writing, it could either be through peaceful protests in the streets, but anything peaceful that would ensure that our people are secured, we have to stand up and do it. Another thing we need to do, we need to quit lip service. We have, like Roderick said this morning, we have desktop NGOs, we have desktop CSO people. We need to leave that position and move the place of action. This is not time to pay lip service. Comrades are being killed on a daily basis. They are being arrested. It could be your turn. It could be my turn tomorrow. It is time to stand up and quit putting lip service to this fight that we are in. We need to also understand the distinct politics of repression. Can't talk deeply about this morning. We have to operate from a knowledge base. We have to understand the relationship between the terminologies that we have in the political space and the activities of repression and criminalization that have been that's affecting the the protectors in the community. So we need to understand, we need to come from a point of knowledge. We need to understand what we are doing. We need to understand the underlying principles behind the actions of the government. We need to get ourselves educated. We need to focus also on the actors acting to mobilize, or that are mobilizing collectively and genuinely. We need to identify them. We know them. But the Bible says, by their fruits we shall know them. We know these guys. So we need to focus on them and support them, and together let us build a movement that will not just be for only Ogoni community, for example, but for the whole of Niger Delta, for the whole of Nigeria, for the whole of Africa, together for the whole of the world, together, coming together to ensure that we mobilize together, we fight together, and we get answers together. I think that is part of why we are doing this webinar today. Another thing we need to look at is we need to seek to understand and recognize that activists and the wider social movement that they are part of exist and experience different levels of oppression and violence. This has to be clear. What affects the man in Niger Delta might not be what affects the man in the north. We need to understand the context of which they are being oppressed, and then we'll be able to find the best way to protect them from their oppressors. We also need to put the complicity of government and big, rich corporations in the act of the fight back by not letting them claim support, by not letting them claim that they support, like we have seen in cases where the big corporations come to the COP, for example, and they paint themselves as the green companies who are ensuring that the climate is safe and the atmosphere is free from CO2. Whereas in their country, they might be doing that, but in Africa, in many parts of the other world, they are busy polluting. We need to stand up against such government and big, rich corporations who have this kind of claim. We need to ensure that their claims match their words. We need to make sure that what they say in their country applies in the country where they operate. These are some of the things that we can do. Another thing that we can do, we need to rediscover genuine solidarity. We need to look inwards and look at the actors in the movements we are trying to build. We need to also understand that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So when we understand these principles, we'll be able to stand together and protect every protector that needs to be protected. We also need to give visibility to those whose struggles are being repressed to the ultimate detriment of us all. Like I said, injustice in Latin America is injustice in Africa. What affects them, it's only a process of time. It's going to get to us in Africa. What affects us here is only a process of time. It will get us in Latin America. That's why we need to stand together as one to ensure that our people are protected. NGOs also should be free to solicit and receive funds, not only from public bodies in their own state, but also from donors, other states, and multilateral agencies, subject only to the law generally applicable to custom and foreign exchange in that land. For example, some policies in the government can say politicians can receive money from anywhere, but they put restriction on civil society groups from where they can receive money from. We need to fight against such law. What applies to the state should apply to the civil society. What applies to civil society should also apply to the state. There should be equality in our discourse. And lastly, the funding that we wanted also to ensure when we have space to be in the funders meeting or whatever, we should ensure that we push that funders should fund only projects that would ensure community grown, long-term approaches to movement building. We've seen cases where they just fund a particular project because the donor has an interest in a particular subject matter, which is only short-term. But there are projects which in the long run will build movement and build community. Most times they don't fund this anymore. So we should ensure that whenever we have space to be at this kind of donor meetings, or we have opportunity to be in the spaces where decisions are taken as to what kind of funds will come or what kind of funds should go where, we should stand and ensure that funding should be only for those projects, or should be majorly for those projects that are long-term, that will build movement and ensure inclusion, active participation, and effective and sustainable models for community protection and defense of civil society everywhere. So like I said, these ideas are not exhaustive. There are still many more ideas. We need more ideas from you. We need more ideas from me. We need to put on our thinking caps and ensure that our people are protected. Thank you very much.